All right, welcome to Chapter 4, where we're going to talk about ethics and social responsibility. All right, so we're going to start with talking about how ethics and legality are two different things, two different standards, how ethics begins with each of us. We are responsible for the actions that we take and our companies take. How do you manage businesses ethically and responsibly, and why should you? Setting corporate ethical standards, corporate social responsibility, and then international ethics and social responsibility is what we're going to be covering. All right, so our objectives are why obeying the law is only the first step in behaving ethically. Asking the three questions you need to answer when faced with a potentially unethical action. Describe management's role in setting ethical standards. Distinguish between compliance-based and integrity-based ethics codes, and then list the 6 steps in setting up a corporate ethics code. Define corporate social responsibility and compare corporations' responsibility to various stakeholders, and then analyze the role of U.S. businesses in influencing behavior and social responsibility in the global market. All right, as you know, there have been a ton of scandals in every single industry fairly recently. We're talking real estate, mortgage, banking, and that's just to name a few. So how do you restore trust in a free market system when you have all of these different bad actors? Well, first, you have to punish those who break the law. Okay. If you can get away with doing something unethical, then there is no incentive for you to behave ethically. So you have to have that punishment to prevent other people from doing the same thing. You need to make accounting records more transparent because typically what ends up happening is where a lot of shady stuff happens is in the dark, if that makes sense. So what you need to do is you need to have more transparency so that anybody looking at it could say, something is wrong here. And if you're not able to do that, then it's a lot harder for you to embezzle from your company or to, hide the reality of your financial situation from stakeholders. So transparency is very important. And then essentially what you need to do as a manager is consider what is ethical, not just what is legal. And you always have to have that in mind. Just because you can get away with it legally doesn't necessarily mean that it's ethical. And so basically what we're talking about here is the law is the minimum standard that everybody has to adhere to. But that's not the ethical standard. That's the minimum. So you need to consider what your minimum ethical standard should actually be, not just what's legally allowed. All right, we mentioned a business ethical issues. Well, here's one in the banking industry with Wells Fargo. This is actually fairly recently. Essentially what happened was the workers were incentivized to create new accounts. So anybody that comes in, they were told to push, getting them, if they only had a checking account, get them to have a savings account or a money market account or something of that nature. So they were always looking to expand their services. And they tied not only promotions, but also your job performance. And eventually, if you didn't achieve this, you'd get fired. So there was this huge push from the CEO down. And what ended up happening was 1.5 million fake accounts were created throughout the company. 500,000 fraudulent credit cards were opened up in customers' names without them knowing what was actually going on, just so that people could actually hit their numbers. Because of this, Wells Fargo got fined $185 million. And this opened them up to further scrutiny. And what ended up happening is Wells Fargo ended up paying over $6 billion in settlements from all of the stuff that they were doing. This, you can't just open 1.5 million accounts with one person. This was a systemic problem in the entire Wells Fargo complex. So it was something that was going on, and it was known about, and nobody was doing anything about it. So this is really a breakdown in management. This is not just people acting as bad bad actors or trying to save their jobs. This was management pushing this agenda, which speaks to a deeper problem. All right, so this is some additional examples of what happens when you have the CEO of a company being the bad actor, because it trickles down. Okay, so Enron, if you're not familiar with it, you should be, because this changed how accounting was actually done. Essentially, what ended up happening with this company is the CEO, Ken Lay, he overstated how many assets they had. So they did some magic trickery with the books, and it ended up showing the investors lost $74 billion because what they were claiming was an asset was actually a liability. So he did this simply to inflate the price of the stock so that they could get their bonuses as corporate officers. You have WorldCom, and once again, accounting irregularities, not disclosing debt and falsely counting revenue that was not received, made the company look like it was $11 billion more profitable than it was. When it came to light, 30,000 jobs were lost, $180 billion in losses to investors. And so once again, this is a significant amount of money that's lost because people are not acting ethically. All right, some other examples in other industries. Volkswagen, car manufacturer, they tampered with their emissions so that essentially what happened was when they were testing the car to see how efficient it was and how clean it was, they had a switch, and when they were done with that, they toggled the switch off, and so that it became a dirtier operating vehicle. And because of that, they had to pay $25 billion in fines. Really, the whole idea behind this was they wanted to claim that it was efficient, but it also they didn't want to have the hit in gas mileage. So they created a workaround to lie to customers. You had Freddie Mac, and what they did was that they understated their earnings by $5 billion. You had Lehman Brothers hit over $50 billion in loans as sales. You had Bernie Madoff, who tricked investors out of $64.8 billion in the largest Ponzi scam in history. So you have a lot of different stuff going on. You're talking about massive, this isn't just some people lost their money. There are pension funds that were invested in some of these companies that got wiped out simply because of bad actors. People that were relying on their retirement, and it just disappears. So this isn't just the company goes bankrupt. This is the company goes bankrupt. All the people get put out of work, and the investors, they lose massively. So this is a huge problem that affects all of society. And that's the reason why it's a focus of all management classes, is to talk about ethics, because it is that important. All right, so what are ethics? The definition is the standards of moral behavior, that is, behavior accepted by society as right versus wrong. So, a couple key things here: society and right and wrong. So what that means is, what is acceptable to me might not be acceptable to you, right? Because if you come from a different society, right, it's okay for me to steal as long as you get away with it, right? If that's the case, that is a moral standard. It's moral as long as you get away with it. Okay. This is an issue, obviously. So your standards of moral behavior. What does society say is right versus wrong? There are certain things that you can say is right or is wrong. For instance, killing people is wrong. Stealing from people is wrong. Bribery is wrong. Okay, but that's not true in every society. There's a lot of countries where bribery is actually accepted it's the way to do business. And it's not considered a moral failure. It's just greasing the wheels of commerce is how they look at it. So that's one of the issues with ethics, is that it's very situational. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't have absolute morals. What that means is, in a normal situation, I'm not going to steal, right? But what if you're hungry? Would you steal then? Some will, some won't. What if you're starving to death? Would you steal? Take it one step further. What if your kid was starving to death? Would you steal? Do you see how a lot of people would say, I wouldn't steal in any situation, until they're put into that situation where they're like, they can justify it and saying, hey, my child is going to starve to death if I don't do this. What is worse, my kid starving or me breaking the law? And so what they'll do is they will break the law in that case. Not everybody, obviously, but some will. And so that is a problem here in society, is that we don't have absolutes. And where you get into the real trouble is when you start justifying bad behavior. Okay, so where do your standards of ethics come from? They can come. A lot of people come from their religion, golden rule, what Nana said. Their upbringing, things of that nature. So these are all the different standards that you have, and that's what makes up ethics. All right, so now we have our standards, wherever you base that off of. Now let's talk about unethical behavior. What this is something that does not conform to that ethical standard. So in the office, this could be violating safety standards, goofing off, personal, it's lying, not acting honorably. At school, plagiarizing, using ChatGPT. Studies have found a strong relationship between academic dishonesty and dishonesty at work. This is one of the reasons why in college we stress this so hard. Because if we can convince you to actually do your own work, not only are you going to learn more, but you're actually starting to develop that pattern of behavior that is going to help you when you actually get into the real world. Because if you don't act ethically here, chances are you won't act ethically in the workplace. So if we can help develop that foundation now, it'll be easier for you to act ethically in the future. And that's what we want for you. All right. So this is a fun one. Everyday ethical choices. What about cheating in colleges today? This is a rampant issue where people will copy from the internet or use ChatGPT or something else to create their project. The problem with this is simple, is that if you use this, it becomes a crutch. And I was talking to a guy that said he had a really interesting interview session with a student, for a recent graduate, and the student kept on pausing at really weird times. It's typically when you pause, you're searching for a word or phrase or how to answer the question, and the person wasn't searching for that. It was searching for just basic sentence structure. And he realized that the problem with the student is the fact that they had outsourced all of their thinking to ChatGPT for the last however many years, and literally could not think without the computer doing it for them. That's a real fear. Use chat to help. I'm totally fine with that. Come up with ideas, brainstorm, things of that nature. Use different resources to actually help you refine and develop your writing. But if you're using ChatGPT to do the writing for you, you're actually just shooting yourself in the foot, because you make yourself dumb because you're so reliant on the computer to do it for you that you cannot do it for yourself. So it's not just they want us to do these stupid assignments and so I'm going to cheat. No, think of it this way. You are developing the ability to write and write well in a lot of different avenues. And your clear thinking will actually set yourself apart in the future when you're having so many other issues with so many other people are having issues because they've outsourced their ability to think. So consider that the next time that you're tempted. All right, so one of the reasons why you need to study ethics, and the reason why we talk about it, is that it's not simple. When you actually get into the business world, it's not should I steal or should I kill somebody, because that's an obvious answer, right? You should not do those things. However, the real ethical dilemmas is when you have two unsatisfactory alternatives. So it's one of those things where I have a course of action and I can either go left or I can go right. The problem is both of them aren't the best. So what do I do in this situation? Here's a perfect example. There was a company that developed blankets, and these blankets were made out of a fabric that the U.S., right after they started producing these blankets, U.S. said you cannot sell these blankets because they do not meet our flammable standards. Our standards for flame-resistant clothing and blankets very much higher than the rest of the world, or a lot of other countries in the world. So all of a sudden, all of these blankets were not able to be sold in the U.S. So this company had a problem. They've already invested about $4 million in these blankets. What do you do with them? You can't sell them as blankets in the U.S. Well, in India, they don't have that same standard. So you have a choice. Can you sell something that you know is not acceptable in the U.S. because these are blankets for children? Sell them to children in India. And what happens if they catch on fire? That's a real moral conundrum that you are going to have to face in business. Can you do it? Absolutely, you absolutely can, because India does not outlaw that kind of fabric for blankets, so you can sell it over there. Should you? Those are the real questions. So when you're faced with something like that, you got to ask yourself some questions. Number one, is my proposed action legal? Is it balanced? And how will it make me feel about myself? Okay, if it's not legal, the answer is no, I can't do it. Is it balanced? If it's not, then you shouldn't do it. And then if you don't feel good about the decision, this is what I did, you shouldn't do it. So if you ask yourself these three questions, then you should know whether or not you should go forward with this action or not. All right, so test prep questions. What is ethics? Ethics are society's accepted standards of behavior. In other words, behaviors that are accepted by society as right versus wrong. Okay. How do ethics differ from legality? Ethics reflect people's proper relationship with one another. Legality is the narrower view. It refers to laws that we have written to protect ourselves from fraud, theft, and violence. So all the time, you're looking at the legal standard is the bare minimum across society. This is what we've accepted. Every bit of society is accepted as what is the minimum standard and how we should engage with each other. That is not the ethical standard. The ethical standard is higher, right? How much higher is really dependent on you and your company. Okay. When faced with ethical dilemmas, what questions can you ask yourself that might help you make ethical decisions? These are the questions. Is the proposed action legal? Is it balanced? And then how would I be treated this way? Would I want to be treated this way? And how will it make me feel? Those are what you really need to be thinking about as you're being faced with ethical decision making. All right, and that is end of part 1 of chapter 4.